topic of the evolution of language. The evolution of language so far has been pretty prevalent that language in general has dramatically changed. We've tackled three aspects into explaining to you how the linguistic evolution has evolved throughout since pre-man to now. We've tackled the historical lens, and we also tackled the futuristic lens, which explains to you how our language is going to continue on its path, and we're going to tell you on whether this is going to become for the better or for the worse for our world in general.
So we'll start it out with the historical lens. And now language is a very broad term, so I think for our use we had to kind of narrow it down and define it. And we define it as any way humans interact and communicate to send a message. Now, early on, before they had a written language or alphabet, pictures were one of the ways that people communicated. So the earliest forms of our definition of language were the cave drawings found in Spain and France. And now before they could actually talk and had a actual language, pictures were very important because it was the only way they could communicate or tell a story, other than like a series of very formal or informal grunts that they had. So these cave drawings that were found about 45,000 years ago are very important to telling the story and setting a basis or a foundation for language. Now jumping forward a few thousand years to the Romantic movement, we see a huge spike in the word love right in the 1800s to about 1800 to about 1850, which kind of perfectly reflects the most prevalent years of Romanticism. Now the word love obviously relates very well with Romanticism and the entire movement, so the fact that there's a huge spike in it just shows that language transforms with the movement that the movements that it is involved with. Now tracking vulgarities, like the word sex, it has a huge increase since about the 1960s. You can see on the chart there's a huge increase. And that is because language started to become more informal, and these informal words, these taboo words, became more accepted and more, they were more accepted, yeah. So this is due to the increase of informal language, people being more accepting of vulgar words and stuff like that as time has gone on. And now another way to analyze historical writing is in government documents. So this is kind of the most formal place of writing. Everything has to be official and go through all these steps to be recognized and all that stuff. So we have a quote here from Federalist 10, which was written by James Madison, kind of as the United States was being founded. And if you analyze the quote itself, I'm not going to read it to you, but you see a lot of commas and it's really choppy, and you see language like majority of the it's sinister views by regular vote may clog the administration and may convulse the society. These words in this sentence structure you wouldn't really see today. The choppiness and words like convulse, clog the administration, sinister views, you wouldn't see that in a more formal piece of writing now. Now going forward to Amendment 25, which is about 1960s, you see a sentence structure that we're much more familiar with. You see less commas, more familiar vocabulary. And that's because over this few hundred years, we've had language change where even the most formal writing has become less formal and become more like we're actually speaking instead of being insanely formal, where everything has to be like down to code and all that stuff. So in conclusion, language has changed from pictures through movements, especially Romanticism, dark Romanticism, Transcendentalism, like the big three where you see these huge like word spikes. Like Transcendentalism, you see words like nature, and alone you see huge spikes, just like in the word love for Romanticism. And based on the evidence that it has already evolved so much, we can easily conclude that language will continue to evolve.
So continuing off what Matt has just identified for us, in the future we're going to see another dramatic change in the linguistic trends. This will mainly try to help simplify future humanistic lifestyle. One trend that we've seen so far is the word structure, which will also result in language loss. Word ordering such as the subject-object-verb, which was the original word structure that many languages had adapted, but recently they've somehow switched it to subject-verb-object, which is what English would be most commonly known as, or even going off into rare branches such as object-subject-verb or verb-subject-object. One example would be such as if the subject verb object form would be the man's dog, or the verb subject object would be the dog of the man, which would be the literal translation, which is quite confusing, but that's how it has evolved. This can result in such uniqueness and such complexity in a language that you'll eventually lose its speakers. And a language dies every 14 days. One elderly speaker, the last soul of its own unique dialect of its own language, will die, and unfortunately that language will be lost forever. And this we'll see will become what we will know as like a one whole global language, how the uniqueness of language will soon lose its identity. There's three perfect circumstances or situations where language will continue to evolve. The cognitive science research from Cornell University declared that individual learning mechanism, biological evolution, and the cultural transmission, or the actual term for that is glossogeny, will interact with each other, and which will result in linguistic evolution in our future. Though biological evolution is not really something we would see, such as like a Darwinism change, but we can see that the technological impact of our language, as technology will continue to increase dramatically, such as Twitter, Facebook, social media, has restrained our language, and it will continue to do so. That will dramatically change into what we know as such as an outside force that will impact our language. So one main way language we will see can continue on in the future would be it will come into one huge global language, and it is not surprisingly known that English is one of these candidates where everyone will turn out to be speaking. 2/3 of English speakers are not first language speakers, which shows you that it's not just America who's just speaking English and spreading, it's everyone else adapting to America's language. And this, the Economist article stated that the big languages are simpler because, as you can see, English is something that we all commonly use. English is spoken in every country, and this helps with trade, with business, with politics, international relations. Even we can go down to technology research, scientific research, space research, and this is what proves my statement before, that language is going to evolve to make our future more convenient for not only within one nation, but within other nations as well. And language is also becoming more complex, believe it or not, because within English, as we would see as one global language, people are trying to mutate our language, as you can say. And this can result in pidgin languages. And pidgin languages are the mashing of two languages, and one common known one would be Spanglish. And Spanglish is not the only one, actually. There's Singlish, which is Singapore and English, or Tanglish, which is Philippine and English, and they're actually becoming quite serious. There's a published version of Don Quixote that's in Spanglish. There is all Shakespeare novels in Singlish. It's been translated, and this is mainly because of, like I said, the three circumstances. The cultural transmission and individual learning mechanism is trying to have these people learn English, so it's easier for them to learn and to use. So they instead use their native languages and use English, which is becoming more prevalent in their world, to combine them into something they can communicate with others. And one reason why people would say why pidgin languages might result is because of the Great Vowel Shift. And the Great Vowel Shift happened between the 1800s and the 1900s, and the UK and the United States are the only countries that actually experienced this huge vowel shift. We can see that the I in pie and the AY in pay, how it's shifted, and all 7 vowel verbs have shifted dramatically. However, if you see in other languages, such as in other countries, such as Hong Kong, or if you go into, let's say, Japan, or even Korea, as I can relate to, Foreigners are actually learning the English not that we use today, but the English we used 500 years ago before the Great Vowel Shift. Therefore, the Pidgin languages are even more complex. And one person stated in the New York Times article saying that they have to learn another language, another English within their own English in order to communicate with other foreigners. Therefore, we can see that whether languages are becoming more simpler in terms of we see it as one huge English lingua franca, or you can see it as being complex, whether English is fragmenting just like Latin did. We will see that this is one main reason why language and the linguistic evolution is going to continue in the future.
Pause. Click. We'll pick it up after lunch.